want to do is get your workspace ready. Bringing in a towel or wearing an apron or a smock would be really smart because as a beginner you're going to get pretty messy. The other thing you'll want to do is bring with you a couple wedged balls of clay. When you sit down to throw, you want to have a couple balls next to you and ready, so in case one of them doesn't work out, you don't have to wash your hands, go back to the wedging table, and re-wedge. You can just keep going. Your ball of clay should be between 1.5 to 2 pounds, and it does need to be pounded and shaped into a ball form. The tools that you need for throwing should already be on your wheel, but just in case something might be missing, what you'll need is a full bowl or bucket of water. You'll need a sponge, a needle tool, a wooden knife, and make sure it is a sharp angled wooden knife. You need a wire tool and a straight edge rib. These right angled wooden ribs are my favorite. They help us get a good cylinder. That's all you'll need. So according to our 8 steps, step 1 is to wedge your clay, which we've already done. So now I'm going to move on to step 2 and center the clay on my wheel. Your wheel head should be dry. If you made it very, very wet, you're going to want to take a paper towel and dry it off. It should be pretty dry, otherwise the clay won't stick. Do not just set your ball down, you actually need to slam it down. There are rings on the wheel head to guide you. If you throw down your ball of clay and you're all the way over here, pick it up and try again. Put it back into a ball form and try again. If you're generally in the center circle, you're fine. And by tossing it and throwing it down, it should be sticking. Okay? Next, you need to get into position for throwing. Your stool should be back, and your elbows need to be on your knees, resting. That means sometimes you're going to be on your tippy toes, and that's normal. When I throw, you're not going to be able to tell that my legs are doing a lot of the work. My legs are actually what's going to be keeping my arms and my hands very still. Without my legs, my arms can be very wobbly, and that's not going to help you throw. Okay? So, to get started, I'm going to get a medium to medium fast speed going. You need to wet your hands completely and wet the clay. I get into throwing position and I take my hands and I cover the ball of clay. At this point, what I am doing is I am squeezing the ball in and down, in and down. And when I first put my hands on the clay, I'm kind of wobbly. It's wiggling. My goal in this step is to make it stop. So I brace my arms, I brace my legs, I brace my wrists, and I make that ball of clay hold still. Get all the wobbles out. Centering your clay is a feeling. I cannot look at it and tell you if it's centered. It has to feel very smooth underneath your hands and like it's not wobbling. Once you feel like it's centered, you move into step 3, where we're going to take this ball of clay and we're going to work it into a cone. Make sure your hands are always wet and the clay should feel slippery under your hands. As soon as the clay starts to feel sticky, it means you need more water. So I'm going to come in on this clay, close in on it, and I'm going to squeeze right here with this part of my hand. I'm going to squeeze, and the clay is going to be forced up. Once I squeeze and I feel the clay move, I need to walk up with it. until my hands slip right off. And this you may need to do 2, 3, 4, 5 times. It depends how well you're squeezing. So this is an absolutely decent sized cone. The next step is to bring this back into a dome. My left hand is like the catcher's mitt. I'm going to hold that clay. My right hand is going to push. I actually use this part of my hand to push the clay down. I am still bracing my arms on my legs all the time. So my catcher's mitt and the pressure, and I start to push down. My left hand is doing a lot of work holding that clay into place. And I keep pushing it until I bring it into a nice dome. If you notice, I'm going to take my right hand and kind of slide it down. You know, using my hand as a mold to shape it to this curvature of my hand. This is a nice dome. Sometimes when we dome it back down, we may push it off center. If that happens, just go back to step 2 and re-center that clay, okay? The next step now is I have to open up this dome. That's about a 2-part process. There is no rule as to what finger you should use. Some like to use a thumb, some an index finger, and others a middle finger. That is up to you, whichever you feel more steady. The trick though is you must feel for the exact center point. And I have a little trick to help you with that. I'm gonna just kind of clean off my clay here. With a fingertip, you can go off to the side, apply a little bit of pressure, and move your finger towards the middle. By doing that, you formed a little pimple there. That's the exact center, and that's where you're gonna drill down into your dome. So here I go, making sure that my hands are slippery. I'm gonna go right on top of that, and I'm gonna drill straight down with a very strong finger, just like a drill would do, okay? I'm being very careful not to pierce through the bottom. A couple of things you can do to make sure you don't pierce through the bottom. The first is to take a measurement of your dome. So since I usually drill with my middle finger, I would take a measurement. I see that my dome is about as tall as my knuckle. So when I drill down, I'm going to make sure I stop before my knuckle. Okay? The other thing you can do, once you've drilled down, you may use a needle tool. Pierce through the bottom, okay? Slide your finger down to the end and pull it out. That is how deep your bottom is, okay? So if you tried this and you have that much thickness, you can still drill down some more. Or if you try this technique and you have barely any thickness, then your bottom is extremely thin and you need to be careful. Okay. Once you drill straight down, now we need to open this dome up wider. To do this for a cylinder, you're going to, again, whether it's a thumb you're comfortable with, an index finger, it doesn't matter. But you're going to put your finger all the way back to the bottom, and from the bottom, you are going to pull straight towards your stomach. The entire wall has to be pulled at the same time. Okay, you're only opening it large enough for you to be able to get your hand inside of it. If you open too far, you're going to have a hard time making a cylinder. Okay? All right, the next step, step 6, we need to compress our clay. We've just stretched it open, and if you do not compress the clay back, you will probably get cracks in your pottery. So there's 2 places to compress. The first is this bottom. The bottom is really uneven and very stretched out. All I do is I use a fingertip and I kind of work my way from the wall towards the center. And I'm just smoothing it out. I go back and forth a few times. Some students like to use their sponge to kind of smooth out the bottom. Again, it doesn't matter what you do, but it is important to compress the clay. Okay? The second spot that needs compressing is your rim. Your rim needs to remain wide and flat. It should always remain the same thickness as the wall. If you start to see your rim getting very skinny and skinnier than your wall, that rim will probably tear on you. So compressing the rim is something you must do. The way that I compress is I use my left hand like pinchers to support the wall, and I use my right hand and I apply pressure to smooth it out. But my left hand is making sure I don't distort it. Okay. So I've completed step 6 now. I compressed both parts. Now we're ready for step 7, which is pulling the wall. Okay. Before you start that, I'm going to recommend that you always take breaks to clean up your wheel and also clean up your pottery. It is very hard to make good pottery when you can't see it well. So keeping your wheel clean, keeping your pottery clean will allow you to do better pottery. Okay? All right, positioning for pulling a wall is very important. Your wheel is moving counterclockwise. Therefore, we need to be on the right-hand side of the pottery. When I coach you, I will reference the wheel and your pottery as a clock. So you're going to need to know your clock. This is 12, this is 3, this is 6, and this is 9. Okay? Pulling a wall should happen somewhere between 3 and 6 o'clock. That's where your finger position should be. I always say 4 o'clock. Okay? If you're over here on the opposite side, you are moving against centrifugal force and you will ruin your pottery. So placement is very important. Your left hand is always the one that goes on the interior of 4 o'clock. Your right hand goes on the exterior at 4 o'clock. And again, I am using my leg to brace my arms. If you can use both legs to brace both your arms, that's great. But sometimes your left hand may need to be braced by your stomach or your gut, but it should never be out open elbows because you cannot stay steady. What you're going to do at the very bottom at 4 o'clock is you're going to make a pinch. A lot like coning. And as soon as you pinch the clay and you feel it moving, you need to walk up with the clay. And don't let go, and don't give up until your fingertips kind of come to the edge, and then gently release. After each pull, your rim will become slightly deformed. So we're going to go back and compress that rim. You always want it to stay flat and even with the wall. Pulling a wall is something you will do multiple times. So I'm going to do it again. I go back to 4 o'clock, left hand inside, right hand outside. I'm braced and I pinch at the bottom, and as soon as I feel the clay moving, I move with it. Notice my wheel is going slower. So step 7, pulling a wall, this is the slow dance. You need to go slow and steady. It's fragile now. And if your wheel head is moving too quickly, then your walls will probably collapse. You will continue to repeat step 7 as many times as you need in order to get the walls as tall and thin as necessary. Now, before I give you a few more tips, I want to show you a piece that I have a cross section so you can better see my finger positions. So I've made this cylinder and cut it in half, okay? When I am pulling a wall, my right hand on the outside is right here where this dip is, okay? My inside fingers are slightly above it. So contrary to what people think, they're not perfectly in the same spot. Inside fingers are slightly above my outside fingers, okay? And as I pinch at the bottom and I carry that pinch up, this is how it looks, all the way to the top, okay? When making a cylinder, we're using centrifugal force. And spinning that around really fast means the clay wants to go out. We are telling it to just go straight up. That's difficult for the clay to do. So you have to guide it. So another tip, when I am pulling a wall, okay, my fingers are not aiming for straight up. They're actually slightly aiming and leaning towards the center. But centrifugal force is making it go out a little bit, which then makes it straight. So you want to be careful that you are aiming slightly towards the center in order to get a straighter wall. Okay? This right-angled rib is wonderful for straightening up these walls. Okay? You'll want to make sure it's wet so that it's slippery up against your clay. My left hand, which goes inside, will support the wall, and the rib will just go directly on the outside. And I'm not pulling a wall, I'm just kind of pushing from the inside up against this nice straight edge. And that will remove throwing marks, and it will remove any unevenness you may have. But it takes practice. Notice when I'm done, I can press my rim yet again. That will keep it very circular and very smooth and strong. Okay, now I'm on step 8. I'm ready to remove this off of the wheel. There's a couple of steps to do that. The first is use your sponge and clean up your wheel. Remove any water that's extra and water that is sitting on the inside of your pottery, which will probably happen. If I were to leave that water in there, it would eat through the bottom of my pottery. So I just take my sponge and I set it in there and I let it soak it up. It's just soaking up the water, and then I squeeze it out. Okay? Once it's cleaned up, we now need to cut it off the wheel. You're going to be using your knife and your wire tool for that. The knife is first, and again you're going to work at 4 o'clock here on the bottom. Okay? This tool needs to be held very steady. So double-handed, and if you notice, my elbows are in my gut. I'm using my entire body to brace myself, and the splash pan. I will also be resting my hand on the splash pan. I spin the wheel slowly, and what I want to do is remove this extra lump of clay here at the bottom. As a beginner thrower, your extra clay at the bottom here will be quite a bit, and we need to remove it. So I start at the top of the lump, and once I'm steady, I start to slowly apply pressure. Okay? Now if you notice, I'm at an angle, a little bit of a diagonal. That's going to be important in a minute that I will show you. I stay steady, I let the wheel do the work, and I know I'm done when I hear it hit the wheel head. It makes a scraping noise that you can hear. Then I stop my wheel, I take my knife out, and now I use my knife to scrape away all that extra clay that I just cut off. Now if you notice, I have a nice clean edge with a little bit of a bevel, okay? The next step is breaking the suction with your wire tool. You always start away from you. Do not start here and move it away, because you will probably cut off the edge of your pottery here because you can't see it. You always start here and you're going to scrape it. And when you scrape it towards you, okay, you're going to do it once, and then you might even do it a second time. Okay? You need to hear that scraping. Okay? Now that the suction has broke, I use this little bevel for my fingers. Don't ever grab your pottery by the walls. They're so fragile, you will distort the whole thing. So I always tell people you need double peace signs and slide them underneath that beveled cut, and you need to twist and lift. Okay? You will bring it over to your piece of wood, and you just completed your first cylinder. So